what attracted me to the story is that it's an underdog story, against the odds. There's always, of course, there's something to be said for being excellent and winning all the time, but it doesn't make as good stories as underdog stories, I think. And I think the fact that they came so close and failed, but then they, eventually qualified 4 years later. I think the part in Singapore is really the heart of the film. Playing in the World Cup is the greatest achievement, but actually qualifying was, the almost a forgotten story. This was a really undocumented story. We found that, there weren't that many films about it or articles, whether in English and Arabic. So we wanted to tell the story, retell it for a new generation. And like I said, Image Nation. I'd like to thank Danielle Parisi, by the way. She's here. Not sure where she is, but because she made it happen. And so yeah, putting the story there, not just as a sporting story, but as a cultural story as well, and a landmark in UAE history.
How did you devise, telling the film in this way? Because the wealth of archival footage is fantastic, but then it has also an energy, like the way you've utilized the music, and how like each theme and each moment has like a particular music that was like culturally relevant at the time, but then also like the original score for the film is really great.
We did a lot of research with the music, and we're trying to be very accurate historically with the music. So, for example, with the first Gulf Cup that you see is black and white, and there's a weird chanting music going on. That was actually shown before football matches on TV, usually. A Saudi Arabian channel is where everybody watched football. So there was a lot of, we tried to be culturally accurate.
I think the first thing we did was we picked a list of players who achieved the most. I think that was the starting point. And then after that, I think a list of matches really that sort of summarize the history. There's only so much you can put there. So a few matches of at the beginning, the first time the Gulf Cup was played in the UAE, which was '82, which is time of real cultural change and the start of the improvement of the team, and then obviously the relevant matches, the loss to Iraq in '85, the games in Singapore, which is, as I said, that's the heart of the film, and then the matches played in the World Cup. They're a little bit more familiar to the audiences. So it was the other ones that are a little bit more difficult to find, and sort of to get all the right action in there.
I was approached by Image Nation, who were involved in developing film and talent in the UAE, and I was asked whether or not I'd like to get involved in helping build this tradition and get involved in a mentoring role. So it was a really good privilege, to work with a team from the UAE. There was also there was an imperative to try and develop first-time directors, and Ali is actually originally a journalist, and he'd come up with the idea for the story. It's an iconic tale in the UAE, but as he said, it hadn't been told in film, and certainly not a feature film. So a lot of the time we spent early doors, just trying to figure out. We knew what the end point was. We knew that the UAE qualified for the World Cup, which is an astounding achievement, bearing in mind that the UAE had only been a country for 20 years, and with a tiny population, less than a couple of million, and was originally just a real disparate group of Bedouin tribesmen and tribespeople. So there was quite an epic story there to be told, but it was just a question of really trying to figure out, what was the full passage of this tale that would stretch over 90 minutes, and what were the narrative beats, what were the games. We were just talking about whether or not we could tell the story in 5 or 6 matches, and that was the real kind of the crux of our conversations, really. We spent a lot of time on the phone just figuring out what materials we had, trying to figure out as well methods to actually even gather this archive, because there's not much of a tradition for archiving media in the UAE as yet, and so it was a real effort just to figure out all the different sources where any of these photos or the footage might exist, and that was somewhat of a challenge in its own right.
What I hope comes across in the film is just what a short period of time all this happened in. The United Arab Emirates became an independent country on December 2nd, 1971, and like all these players were born just before that. So they were all born, before the country was, was unified, and as they said at the start, they were just playing on sand. There was no organized football. There was no training programs. The football league wasn't up and running. It was very, very basic. So to get that first generation of kids, growing up in the 70s, for in less than 2 decades to get to the World Cup, that's, I think, an amazing achievement. And I think it's an achievement that, so for me at least, grows year by year, because they haven't been able to repeat it since then. They've got, the resources now are much better, but it's a lot more difficult. That's one thing. But it was difficult them back then as well. So so yeah, I mean the longer, we've got a good chance this year. But so the longer that time goes on without them going back to the World Cup, the greater the achievement.
But maybe you can tell us what's happening on the ground and what's going on with like the audiences for documentary.
So I have been in Abu Dhabi 9 years working. So I've seen the film industry grow and how much the government has really, really put a lot of initiatives into developing the film industry there. And I have to say it's unbelievable, actually. I joined Image Nation when Danielle de Parisi opened up the documentary department. And we're only a few years old, and we've, our documentary department, and we've grown very rapidly as well. And we've not just got an eye on the local audience and local films, we've also got an eye on the international. So it's rapid. I think it's rapid in everything in the UAE in terms of growth. It's rapid, but again, we're a very small, tight-knit community. It's a unique place, and it's a great place to be working right now, actually, in the film industry.
Another thing about the players, again, which I hope comes through, but they just, I wouldn't say like they had very tough lives, but they had very modest lives, at the beginning, so everything was a great effort, They really had to work hard for what they did. None of them were professional, they all had separate jobs. I mean, they were, and after the World Cup, they all went back to their old jobs, as firemen or policemen or civil servants and all that. So yeah, I mean, everything they did was like a major, major effort, they weren't being really paid money for it. They did it was a different time, where you could play just for the love of the game kind of thing, So again, that's one of the things that they call them the UAE's golden generation, and I think there's a lot of love from the people for them because they were just so modest and underdogs, you say. Like I said, when the country was unified, the 7 Emirates were unified in 1971. The UAE Football Association was formed straight after. I think it was the first sort of association of its kind in the country that was formed. And within like 2 months, they had joined FIFA again. So like between becoming a country and actually joining FIFA was 2 months, and then on the 3rd month, the UAE played its first game. So right from the beginning, sports had a role to play. I think and football being the most popular sport there, obviously, like really helped, and that continued. Even through the tough times when they were being beaten like 4 or 5-0. They weren't a very good team in the 70s. This is a lot more difficult than writing. And I think, honestly, I mean, especially with Hana and Danielle and Stevan and all that, it was a completely new world for me, as a first time, involvement in films, and the amount of effort that goes into it is incredible. Just like you mentioned the archives, shooting, setting up the shooter, Libna, who used to help organize everything for us. I mean, it was a real eye-opener of what it takes to get a film done, work on it over a couple of years, from filming, coming up with the idea, filming, and then post-production. So, it's different, for my role is kind of similar because we're still on the story side of making the film, but all the other aspects that go into it, I can't thank them enough, they're amazing.
Well, congratulations, it's a terrific film, you've done a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you so